Now, over the last 3 years, the CPE has been collecting data and building up our knowledge about what is happening in the private education sector. Now, today I hope to share some observations on the progress that's been made and where more attention can be given. But let me start with 3 caveats. Now, first, this is not going to be a comprehensive statistical report. Otherwise, I would have called it the Statistics of the Sector report. Second, this is based on data that's been provided by all of you through our annual returns exercise. And finally, given that we've only just started collecting data over the last 3 years, I think it's going to be difficult to draw longer-term trends from just these few data points. Now, having said that, this is what I'm going to be going through today. First, I'll give all of you a snapshot on the sector and how it's done over the last year. Next, I'll share a model of quality, which I hope can act as a starting point for a common frame of reference for subsequent dialogues on quality. Next, I'll give some observations on the progress of the sector. Finally, I'll wrap up with an update on some of our ongoing initiatives and share some thoughts on the work to be done in the near future. So, let's start with some numbers. As at December 2012, there were 332 registered private education institutions, out of which 115 were EduTrust certified, either provisional or 4-year. This is the distribution of the number of PEIs based on each PEI's predominant course offering. As you can see, commercial schools comprise over 50% of registered PEIs, and vocational schools comprise just over 20%. These schools offered 5,800 courses last year at the various levels shown. If you notice, just over 50% of courses offered were diplomas and above. Last year, the sector saw 227,000 students, a slight drop from the 232,000 that we had in 2011. Local students, that is, Singaporeans and permanent residents, comprise the majority of the students studying in private education sector at just over 55%, similar to 2011. As for international students, 70% of international students, excluding those that study in foreign system schools, came from China, Vietnam, India, and Indonesia. So, what are all these students doing? Okay, the numbers on the right show where these students are by the types of PEIs that they're in and the type levels of courses that they're doing. So you can see more than 65% of students are studying in commercial schools, and just over half were doing diploma and bachelor level programs. Overall, the students were supported by about 17,500 academic staff, of which 2 in 3 were Singaporean or permanent residents, and most were working on a part-time basis. Last year, the CPE Student Services Center at YMCA handled about 3,800 cases as well, of which 22% were complaints of one kind or another. So overall, what we can see is that the profile of the sector has remained relatively stable from 2011 to 2012. But what do all these numbers mean? And now, is the quality of the sector good or bad? As SMS alluded to in a speech, the concept of quality is probably a multifaceted one. And I think if I ask 10 people in the room, we'll probably get at least 11 answers. So allow me to offer a perspective which I hope can align our understanding. If we took education as a value chain, then we could perhaps take prospective students as inputs into the system. For each PEI, I would suggest that there are 3 critical areas where value can be added to students and where quality would be important. First, students will experience the business model of the PEI. This includes how all of you choose the right market segment, how courses are offered and marketed, how pricing is structured, and how students are advised and recruited at the front end. Second, students will of course experience the infrastructure supporting the learning experience. This includes not just the physical infrastructure like buildings and classrooms, but also processes like student counseling and grievance handling that support the student during their time in the private education institution. Finally, and perhaps most importantly to a PEI's value proposition, it is the quality of the PEI's academic programs and how it is delivered through the academic staff that could add the most value to students. Now, working together as a system, PEIs then generate graduates as a key output. These graduates then enter the job market where they may experience different outcomes. And in my view, the quality of the outcomes depends very much on the recognition of the quality of the output by employers in the job market. And as with most systems, as the outcome improves, so will the recognition of the PEI graduates. So, to obtain a more holistic view of quality, both at the PEI level and at the sector level, I would argue that we need to look at the key aspects of this value chain and see whether the right structures, processes, and people are in place. Now, this is the focus of our current existing assessment tools like the Enhanced Registration Framework, or ERF, and EduTrust. Moving forward, we may also need to consider the quality of the academic programs being offered, and also the performance of the PEI in delivering these programs. More critically, and as SMS mentioned, we might also start needing to look at the performance of PEI graduates in the job market, their outcomes, as one indicator of quality. And as many of you may already know, the CPE had earlier this year commissioned a baseline survey looking at the perception and employability of PE graduates, and we hope this study would give us some insights when it concludes in the third quarter of this year. Now, one final point on recognition is that a stringent and robust quality assessment framework can also contribute to greater recognition because there is greater trust and integrity in this overall process and its outputs. So, with the numbers and the framework in mind, let me share some observations on the progress of the sector so far. The first observation is that the profile of the sector has improved. More PEIs are now achieving the 4-year ERF status, 3 in 5 compared with 2 in 5 in 2011. 48 PEIs improve on their ERF status on their first renewal, and 4 PEIs improve on their ERF status on subsequent renewals in 2012. There are also more PEIs achieving EduTrust certification. As mentioned, there are now 115 schools that have some sort of EduTrust certification, up from 94 the year before. EduTrust certified PEIs now make up 1 in 3 registered PEIs compared with 28% in 2011. And 2 in 5 in this group have sufficiently robust systems and processes that have allowed us to award them the 4-year EduTrust award. This compares with 36% in 2011. Now, 6 PEIs managed to improve their EduTrust status in their first renewal, and 4 PEIs improved their EduTrust status in subsequent renewals in 2012. The sector has also seen a healthy turnover in PEIs. In 2012, we saw 35 new entrants into the sector and 45 exits. The next observation I'll make is that students do seem to make quality a key consideration in their choices. Now, I will share with you 2 data points that allow us to reach that kind of conclusion. First, which PEIs are students choosing to study in? Now, if we exclude students studying in foreign system schools, we see that 7 in 10 students chose to study in EduTrust certified PEIs in 2012, and this is a marginal increase from the 68% in 2011. But if we look deeper into the data, nearly 85% of these students are choosing to study in PEIs that have attained the 4-year EduTrust award. Second, what courses are students choosing to take up? Now, if we focus on bachelor programs, we currently have about 900 bachelor programs coming from various universities across the world. And 64% of these universities are ranked in the top 400 of either the QS or the Times Higher Education survey. So while 64% of the programs come from ranked universities, of all the students studying in a bachelor's program, proportionately more students, 83% of students, were actually studying in a program coming from a ranked university. So just looking at these data points, we can probably come to some conclusion that students are choosing on the basis of quality. But if we look at the other aspects of courses offered by PEIs, we could argue there is room for improvement. If we look at the contact hours for diploma courses as an example, for the top 3 subject areas of business, hospitality, and IT, we can see a wide range of contact hours. You have courses that start from about a little over 100 hours to over 600 hours at the top end. Now, I would concede that contact hours are not the only aspect of quality that we should be concerned about, but I think this is indicative of the wide variation of quality of courses that are offered in the sector currently. Now, I think there's an opportunity to narrow this spread and for the industry to establish guidelines and standards such that students are better informed of the quality of the programs they sign up for. The second point is on the diversity of subject areas and course offerings, and this speaks to the point that SMS made about complementarity with the public system. Now, last year, we had approximately 3,300 post-secondary courses, and 40% of these courses were in business. Now, if you combine this with the next two most popular areas, hospitality and IT, they make up over 2/3 of the post-secondary courses offered. Now, many of you could argue that this is just supply following student demand, and I would agree with you. But this profile of courses may not quite match the opportunities that are being offered in the economy, and hence, student outcomes may actually suffer when they finally get into the job market. The concentration of so many players in these areas, I would argue, also makes for a very competitive environment, which means that those PEIs who are offering low quality or undifferentiated programs will definitely find it more challenging to survive as students become more discerning. The next observation I'll make is in the support of students. And this is an area which I think we can improve on. The good news, however, is that complaints have dropped by a fifth to 850 cases from 2011 to 2012. However, this is still 850 complaints, and a large proportion of these complaints still relate to basic issues like fees, where nearly 40% still involve some complaints with fees of one sort or another. The next 40% of complaints involve administrative support processes, admin disputes, student registration, contract issues, student pass issues, as well as issuance of certificates. It may be cliche, but consumer expectations are rising all the time, and in a service industry such as ours, an effort, I think, must be made to keep up. In this respect, the sector also suffered a hit in the Consumer Satisfaction Index of Singapore survey done by SMU. Now, after a pop in 2011, where we achieved a score of 74.5% consumer satisfaction, we saw a dip in consumer satisfaction by about 5.5 percentage points in 2012. Finally, I think there are opportunities to raise the standards and competencies of teachers in the sector. As a starting point, PEI academic staff are generally well qualified already, and over 85% have at least a bachelor's degree. Many of them also have significant years of industry experience that they bring to the job. However, only 1 in 3 teachers have some sort of pedagogical training at the moment, and 40% of PEIs have told us that they didn't invest in any teacher training at all, and a further 30% spent less than $250 per teacher last year. I understand that there are some challenges given the way that things are structured at the moment. With such a large proportion of part-time teachers, I think it makes it very difficult. It doesn't give an incentive for PEIs to invest in training. Individuals themselves may also not have the incentive to upgrade, given the strong demand for academic staff. But if we all believe that the quality of teachers is the foundation for the quality of student outcomes, then I think more can be done between the industry, CPE, the teachers, and even unions like ESU, and I'm open to suggestions. Now, what I've just gone through are some of the more significant observations on the state of the sector, and the broad conclusion that we can draw is that progress has been made over the last 3 years, but certainly more can be done to raise standards and quality, and of course the perception of the sector. Now, in the next part, I'm going to give a brief update on some of the key industry development initiatives that were announced last year and are currently in progress. The first is the Republic Polytechnic Specialist Diploma in Applied Learning and Teaching. The Specialist Diploma was developed in conjunction with Republic Polytechnic in response to industry calls to address PEI teachers' needs for a structured training in pedagogical and assessment skills. I'm delighted to announce that the first batch of Specialist Diploma students had completed their studies in February this year, and the program, which is currently now in its 4th intake, has benefited more than 120 PEIs so far, 120 PEI teachers so far. Next is the IDA's call for collaboration for school management systems. Now, this was mentioned a couple of days ago by the Minister for Communication and Information. Now, having a comprehensive school management system helps PEIs to better manage their operations and processes. We're happy to announce that 3 vendor-led consortiums have been successfully identified to encourage sector-wide adoption of cloud-based school management systems to raise quality in the sector. And as many as 105 PEIs may stand to benefit from 1st April of IDA's generous adoption and subscription funding for up to 2 years. Now, beyond the call for collaboration, PEIs also continue to enjoy IDA's iSprint support for up to 1 year till March 2016. And finally, we have Spring's Education Innovation Initiative. the EI initiative. Spring Singapore had committed $10 million grant through its Education Innovation Initiative in May last year to catalyze innovation and capability upgrading among SME education providers. Now, to date, Spring has approved funding support for 16 projects under initiative amounting to $2 million. And out of these, 7 PEIs have successfully obtained funding approval amounting to nearly $1 million to spearhead projects towards stronger knowledge retention, higher teacher productivity, and resource optimization. This year, Spring estimates that another $3 million worth of grants will be committed to support EI projects led by PEIs. So that was just a brief update on some of the initiatives that were ongoing last year. So what is the future for private education sector in Singapore? Now, looking at the data and looking at where we are at now, I think there are opportunities, but there are also challenges. As highlighted by Senior Minister of State, there's a certain level of social responsibility that any education endeavor must shoulder, even those that have commercial interests as a starting point. But with great responsibility comes the opportunity to contribute to larger objectives. So, for example, given the economic restructuring that we are currently experiencing now, the private education sector could play a vital role in helping our economy and individuals make the transition. But the challenge is how CPE and the industry can work together to ensure that the future quality of the sector is the basis for its longer-term sustainability. This will be more important as competition increases. And this competition comes not just from the changes in the domestic environment, but also from abroad. From both direct competition from aspiring education hubs like the EduCity at Iskandar, or more traditional jurisdictions like Australia, UK, and the US. The pressure for quality will also come from your academic partners as they seek better partners to work with. In my discussions with the regulators in the UK and Australia, for example, they tell me that they increasingly see the quality of partners that their institutions choose as critical to their education reputation. And it will not be very long before they start imposing, I think, new requirements for them to fulfill. And the less well-regarded PEIs are likely to feel this more keenly and very soon. In the end, rules and regulations can only do so much to raise quality. It can set a minimum threshold, but excellence, I think, is going to be difficult to legislate. So really, if we want the sector to have a quality future, I would suggest that the sector itself must be motivated to raise quality. And it's not just because of social responsibility, but also because good quality is good for business. To do so, I would suggest that PEIs need to focus on the 3 key areas which I highlighted earlier. First is the quality of business models. By being more pro-student, more student-centric, PEIs will be able to attract better students who in turn are likely to have better outcomes, and this will contribute to a better reputation and better business in the long run. Second, the quality of infrastructure, which I think PEIs must continually invest in. Better and more supportive infrastructure will not only improve the student experience overall, but it will also help students achieve better academic outcomes. Finally, the quality of academic programs. PEIs should endeavor to work with partners of high standard to offer programs that are relevant and add value to students. PEIs should also continually upgrade their academic staff to ensure that they are pedagogically up to date and can deliver the programs in the most effective manner. Now finally, I just want to give everybody a sense of what's coming up for the rest of this year. Now CPE will continue to monitor the sector, and we will not hesitate to take errand players to task. This is a vital role, and this protects the overall reputation and integrity of the sector and helps to create a trusted environment for students and a stable foundation for businesses to operate. We will also continue to ensure that students are educated and supported as they pursue private education in Singapore. And we will also continue to work with stakeholder agencies, PEIs, and industry associations like SAPE and APSC to support PEIs that want to improve their own quality and that of the sector. For the rest of this year, we will also be working on 2 key thrusts. First, CPE will study and put in place changes that aim to reduce administrative burdens and compliance costs for PEIs. Given the improving profile of the sector, we will review current processes, and where possible, we will cut down the amount of red tape and documentation required for us to ensure current levels of regulatory compliance. Second, and perhaps more importantly, I would like to extend an invitation for the sector to engage us in a dialogue on where we think the level of quality for the sector should be. Over the coming months, the CPE intends to consult industry on a range of initiatives to raise quality. This would include potential changes to the requirements for ERF, EduTrust, as well as possible enhancements to the Private Education Act. And we hope that all of you will participate constructively. And with that, I conclude my presentation and wish everybody a good day of learning and networking. Thank you very much.